Good morning everyone, and welcome to this workshop. I'm pleased to introduce today's session. The topic of today, as you can see from the first slide we are showing, is about the network code on gas capacity allocation mechanism. In this workshop, we aim to discuss the achievements and the way forward of this network code. Why are we doing that now? Because of several reasons. They are both backward-looking and forward-looking. If we look backward, we see that in the last few years, the internal gas markets have been put under pressure for different reasons. The global COVID pandemic first, and then in 2022, the energy crisis, which heavily affected the gas markets, also with effects on how capacity rules have been applied. Yet, what we saw also and what we monitored with our activity showed that the operational rules of the internal gas market prove resilient, which is clearly a good sign. At the same time, there are lessons that we learned on how things could work even better. This is one of the backward-looking reasons why discussing the network codes revisions now. Another one, which is very crucial and forward-looking, is about how gas markets need to be fit for purpose in terms of achieving the climate objectives under the Green Deal, targeting 2050, but of course, interim objectives and targets in 2030. And therefore, in this respect, all operational rules need to be made fit to achieve the bigger policy visions. In this respect, as you may know, we have some achievements already reached in the last few days. On Friday, the co-legislator, in fact, found a preliminary political agreement on the gas, I would say hydrogen and decarbonized gas regulation under the same package. And just a few days before, the co-legislator reached a preliminary political agreement on the directive under the same package. In fact, these two big achievements are setting really important milestones for the developments of gas markets and hydrogen markets in the future. That's in fact now time to revise the network codes, starting from the priority ones, in order to make sure that the whole internal market can still remain fit for purpose. With this background, it's also worth recalling that at the last Gas European Regulatory Forum in May 2023 in Madrid, the so-called Madrid Forum, also stakeholders called the European Commission to start this revision process smoothly, rightly from the code for the allocation of gas capacity and then the congestion guidelines. In this respect, ACER plays a key role because we in ACER have the formal mandate to lead this process and to consult stakeholders in a very extensive way, and then come with a recommendation on which aspects to a review of the existing network codes. In fact, this workshop is precisely one step in this amendment process of the network codes. Many of you for sure already have seen that we launched a public consultation, quite detailed. We opened it last month on the 12th of November. It's going to be open until the 5th of January. So please, after this workshop, if you haven't done already, so please take the time to respond to it and to signal what you think needs to be addressed in terms of scoping the revision of the gas capacity allocation mechanism network code. Now, before going to the workshop itself, let me just mention a few housekeeping rules. You see in the chat a Slido QR code. Please scan it and use Slido to post any of your questions. In fact, questions you can post at any time, but we will collect them and discuss them during the Q&A. Also, you'll see your microphones are muted, as well as cameras are off. So unless the presenter gives you rights to speak, you won't be able to speak in the webinar. The slides of this workshop will be also made available in the next few days. You actually don't need to write to us, because we'll write to you with a thank message for having attended the workshop in the next few days, and we'll link all the related material and presentations that are going to be shown today. Finally, regarding the questions, if there are some you already read in the Slido chat, you can like them so that you signal that you are interested in getting a reply to that as well, and we'll make sure that the team will take care of replying those questions. Let me go smoothly to the agenda. We are now at the introductory remarks. I will soon give the floor to my colleagues, but just to tell you that today we planned a 3-hour workshop with a break after more or less 1 hour. We planned 3 main sections. The first one is about maximizing the capacity offered. The second one is about improving the allocation of capacity. Both these sessions have a presentation from a speaker, and then panel discussions followed by Q&A. And then we had a third session about other aspects of the capacity allocation mechanism network code. We'll then conclude with some remarks at the end. Having said that, I would now give the floor to my colleague Edouard Lebrun, who is the chair of the Gas Capacity Allocation Network Code Task Force at ACER, and working for the French National Regulatory Authority, CRE. Edouard, thanks. Good luck. I wish us all a very productive workshop and very interesting discussions to you.
Well, thank you, Ricardo. I hope you can see me correctly and hear me well. Hello, good morning, everyone. So indeed, as Ricardo said, so I'm working for the French energy regulator CRE, but today I will be intervening in this workshop as chair of the CAM task force. So I will be speaking on behalf of regulators. And so actually, before getting to session number 1, just let me briefly set the scenes, in particular when it comes to the legal framework and also the core principles for capacity allocation at interconnection points within the EU gas market. I'll try to go quickly, but well. So the capacity allocation rules, they originate from the gas regulation, which, as Ricardo said, is getting revamped currently. We don't know precisely what will come out, as the final trilogue took place last Friday, and we didn't have official text yet. But what is pretty sure is that principles for capacity allocation will not change. They are currently set in Article 16 of the gas regulation, what may become Article 9 in the recast proposal. So, and the 2 basic principles are first to maximize available capacity to the market participants, and this topic will particularly be addressed by my colleague Nico Kertz under session 1. And the other important principle is to ensure a transparent and non-discriminatory access to capacity. The gas regulation provides in this respect that these allocation rules should provide economic signals, that they should be compatible with how the market and trading hubs work, that they should be capable of adapting to evolving market circumstances and conditions. We'll come back to this notion more precisely, and also be compatible with the way national network access works. So from this regulation, you get the network codes, and in particular, the first of the network codes that was implemented is the CAM network code. So briefly, what it aimed at doing when it was enacted was to guarantee equal, transparent, and non-discriminatory access to transmission capacity for all market participants. This, in the code, is made possible through explicit allocation of capacity via auctions. This is provided for in Article 2, paragraph 2, but also with the possibility of implementing implicit capacity allocation schemes, which is provided for under the paragraph 5 of this same article. And so to allow for this equal, transparent, and non-discriminatory access to capacity, a few core principles were enacted in this network code. The first one is the objective of maximizing the capacity available at a given IP, promoting collaboration and cooperation between adjacent TSOs. The second one is to generalize the notion of bundling of capacity. We'll come back to this notion also. Another important one is the cascading offer of products, which means that longer-term products are offered first before shorter-term ones. Also, the set-aside rule, which we will come back on, which basically says that you need to dedicate a portion of capacity for shorter-term products. When I say shorter-term products, is less than a year. Also, it provides for a list of standardized capacity products, which you all very well know. Capacity is allocated at auctions with standardized algorithms and using a common auction calendar. So this is how things work. And my last slide, and after I will hand over the mic because I said that I already have 3 minutes late, is now that we have this, you know that we've been working these past few years on reflections to adapt these rules to the current needs of market participants, and also given what we experienced during the gas supply crisis, also make these rules more resilient to potential changes in market conditions. So in the coming months, ACER, and when I say ACER, I also mean in particular the ACER CAM task force, which gathers representatives from regulators, national regulators. We will work on the preparation of an amendment proposal to this network code, which we will submit to the European Commission. We aim at doing so during 2024. And this work will first take stock of all the past policy papers from ACER and all the proposals that were made these past few years, but also from the joint papers and joint proposals that we have been elaborating jointly with ENTSOG, in particular following the case which was posted by EFET on the functionality platform. And of course, taking into account the feedback that you will kindly provide us in the framework of the current public consultation. And to make things clear, what we will, ACER and NRAs, aim to do in this work is to safeguard the key regulatory principles that I talked about one slide before, and also make sure that our proposals, they meet 4 objectives. The first one is the objective of effectiveness. The instruments that we want to modify or that we would like to introduce, they need to accommodate changing market conditions, which we believe the code has not fully been able to do these past few years. The second one is the requisite of efficiency. We want that the changes that we will propose are feasible, implementable, and also cost efficient. And when I say so, it's from the point of view of all stakeholders, so TSOs, booking platforms, shippers. We want also to maintain and reinforce the transparency of the market rules. And when I say so, when I say transparency, I also mean the simplicity of the rules and their readability for all actors. And also something which is important for us also is to prevent any market fragmentation. And this goes with safeguarding the harmonization of the rules. This is something which is very important to us. So this being said, I will now hand over the floor to my colleague Nico Kayatz from ACER, who will start the session 1. Please, Nico.
Thank you, Edouard. And indeed, so my name is Nico Kayatz. I'm working with ACER in the gas markets team. And together with Edouard, I am leading this work on the amendment process that ACER is running. I will have the pleasure to introduce this first session with the presentation on how to maximize the capacity offered. And it will be followed by a panel discussion and questions. So please, if you have questions, put them in the Slido, and that panel discussion will be moderated by Edouard. So maximizing capacity, what does that mean? Well, we have to go back, of course, to the regulation, which Edouard was already referring to. And it has in its Article 16 in the current regulation that the maximum capacity shall be made available to market participants. It has some caveats, of course, system integrity, the security of supply, efficient network operation needs to be ensured. What do we find as further guidance within the CAM network code? In the recitals, it's focusing on having an efficient use of the network, clearly avoiding an inefficient use, making sure that we have optimal market conditions. This is really important. And also it mentions that the free flow of gas can only be supported by having a well-functioning network of interconnected transmission grids. And overall, we have seen that CAM has delivered on these objectives and these principles because what we have been monitoring through our congestion reports is that congestion has been going down in the last few years consistently, that the network was not stressed to the limit, so gas could flow freely within the European Union. But then, of course, 2022 came, and this market crisis proved to be a good stress test, where again, overall, we saw that the networks could support the market, that TSOs made the necessary changes to accommodate the flow of gas to where it was most valued. At the same time, we made some observations on things that we believe can be improved. What we observed, for instance, was the weakening of coordination between TSOs, and that led to some inefficiencies when maximizing the capacity. And I will illustrate this with a simple example. It's based on a true example, but here I made it in a conceptual way so that it can be very easy to follow and to understand what we are hinting at. So what you see here is on the left, some capacity contracted at an exit of an interconnection point. The bottom box is the bundled capacity. So you see that this is exactly matching also the box on the right-hand side for the entry capacity. And then on top of that, we see some different colored boxes. In the red, we have the unbundled exit capacity that in this case, for instance, was made available already early in 2022 and then moving forward. Where on the other hand, we see that for the entry capacity, we had also unbundled capacity offered, but only later in the year. And what is very interesting to see is that there is some overlap between these two. So what does this tell us? Overall, we see that capacity was offered. It was offered as bundled products. What was in excess and could not be matched with a matching product on the other side of the border was offered as unbundled. But we also see this overlap, which leaves a potential for bundling. So this is something that we would like to minimize, where it's possible to bundle capacity. I think it's the preferred option for the market. So this is something that we have been observing. We also took a note of it in the special congestion report that we did, where we focused a lot on coordination, extensive coordination of neighboring TSOs to first jointly optimize the network. And this links back to these changing market conditions that Edouard was also saying as one of the underlying principles of capacity allocation. So we need to be able to deal with changing market circumstances. So this joint optimization of the network is necessary. After that, of course, the joint maximization of the firm bundled capacities. So really the bundling is key. And then afterwards, of course, optimize the sale of interruptible capacities, also considering technical capacity, which is something I will come back to in the second example. It's also important, of course, to always bring back the capacity that has been allocated but is not going to be used. So to have an efficient use of the network, this capacity should be re-offered. Strictly speaking, that is a measure that falls under the guidelines on congestion management procedures. So we do not want to change those rules within this process, which is clearly targeted to the capacity allocation mechanism network code, but we have to be mindful that there are these consistency issues and that we have to to list them to make sure that we do not forget about them, and when the time comes, also address them to have an aligned approach to dealing with the capacity maximization. Second observation that we made is that the information availability and the transparency suffered a bit. We fully acknowledge, of course, the difficult circumstances that TSOs had to work in during 2022. But what we observed and what makes the monitoring of the market also more difficult is, again, an example of some firm capacity was being offered. On top of that, interruptible capacity, and then we have the flow that we could observe. And we observed that flow was going consistently above the firm capacity, and this firm capacity should match the technical capacity. And technical capacity is the maximum in theory. We also observed interruptible capacity that was going well beyond the available flow and the effective flow potential. So it was a bit disconnected from the physical reality. So these are two things that make it difficult to interpret, okay, what is now the potential of the pipeline or of the system, what we would expect to see under this concept of technical capacity, and also what does it mean to contract enormous amounts of interruptible capacity that are disconnected from the physical reality. So we believe that we could have some improvements in that regard. And this is, again, not only limited to the CAM network code, there will also be links with the guidelines on transparency. But what we propose and have in mind is to review the concept of the technical capacity. And on this, already in this special congestion report, we invited input from ENTSOG and TSOs to make a technical note on this. And with that, of course, we can then improve the availability of information on the use of the network, on capacity availability, and on capacity bookings. So these are the two elements that I wanted to highlight and illustrate. And of course, to summarize, of course, all of this is part of the network code. It's touching a number of articles. For instance, the definitions might have to be updated. Article 6 is really the core one on capacity calculation and maximization, and also bundling and interruptible capacity articles may need some tweaks to just improve, of course, to have a better market functioning, as that is in the end the purpose of reviewing the CAM. So that's the brief introduction to the topic, and then I would invite questions to come, while Edouard may want to kickstart the panel discussion and the question session. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Nico. Thanks for this introduction and clarification. I hope this is of help for attendees. So I only see one question in the Slido, so I propose that we keep it for the Q&A session after the panel discussion. And with this, I will welcome our two other panelists for this panel discussion. The first one is Claude Mangin. Hello, Claude. You are director at ENTSOG, and you're particularly dealing with network codes and gas market design. And the second one is, bonjour, Claude. And the second one is Stephen Rose from the European Federation of Energy Traders, EFET. And you are particularly working on gas hubs and gas trading. Welcome, Steve. Actually, maybe my first question, and in particular for you two, maybe not for Nico, who just made the introduction, would be for each of you, what would be the key contribution of the CAM network code since it's just been implemented in terms of capacity calculation, capacity maximization, capacity bundling. It's the maybe most important outcome of the CAM network code. Who wants to start? Claude, maybe?
As you want.
Yes.
Maybe Steve has the same answer. So the main achievement of all the network codes and why network code had this effect during the last decade is the harmonization of the rule. Now a shipper, before having a network code, a shipper had to learn each system with different particularities, and with the CAM network code, we had an harmonization at the European level, and a shipper gained time in learning how each specific system function, because there are some similarities, and yeah, and so competition can be increased because a shipper or trader can expand from one country to others.
Okay, thank you, Claude. Steve?
Yes, no, I agree with that. I think we should be proud of the achievements seen from the CAM network code. I think it's contributed very much towards reducing congestion, reducing the spreads between markets, increasing liquidity, and effectively helping to make the single energy market a success. So, helping gas to flow from countries where it's less valued to countries where it's more valued, etc. So it's really been a building block in terms of the single energy market that we've seen work effectively today. So that's something we can be proud of. In terms of what you mentioned, what are the sort of key successes of this particular thing regarding capacity allocation? I mean, we talked about bundled capacity. I think bundled capacity is very much welcomed by traders. The ability to buy both the capacity at either side of the interconnection point in the same auction, albeit it's two separate products still, and albeit we sometimes find that the conditions of those products aren't identical either side, so you can sometimes get a conditional product matched with a firm product. But generally speaking, the bundling process makes the booking process easier, and the algorithm that effectively takes the available capacity and matches as much of it to offer as bundled, I think is working well. But I think that, you know, that doesn't mean necessarily that unbundled capacity doesn't have a role, and that we should necessarily be looking to try and reduce unbundled capacity, because there are situations where, you know, due to legacy contacts or due to the fact that some counterparties aren't set up to operate in certain markets, where actually buying unbundled capacity and trading gas at the flange is still effective and is still helping towards market efficiency, albeit that's taking place at the entry point into the country rather than at the virtual trading point. But the principle of bundling and the mechanism that allows as much capacity to be bundled as possible, I think seems to be working and is I think supported.
Well, yeah, thank you both of you. So of course, I think we can only agree with what you said. First on harmonization, Claude, I think it's something that we want to keep and safeguard, and also Steve, this issue of bundling. I think from Nico's presentation, you understood that we want to go even further and reinforce the cooperation of TSOs when it comes to bundling capacity at IPs when it's possible, and maximize this. Did you want to add something, Nico, or would you like to go to the questions?
I can only agree with what the colleagues have said. Indeed, this bundling principle is very useful. I think over time, with the introduction of CAM, we have seen it, being more and more capacity was bundled. Also when legacy contracts were, of course, ending. So that's something that we definitely want to keep and see where we can improve that principle to really maximize the offering. But indeed, where surplus capacity is available and it cannot be bundled in a meaningful way, then of course we still want that capacity to be offered to the market, because usually market participants can then find a way to make the best use of that capacity. So that's definitely something to keep in mind.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Nico. My second question that I would like to ask all three of you, and then we will go to the questions that I see up here on the Slido. The question is, when you see the listing of topics on this session of maximizing capacity, which Nico introduced a few minutes ago, what is, in your point of view, the one key provision, one key aspect that should deserve ACER's attention in the work we are going to start to propose an amendment of the network code? What would be the one thing you would change, you would amend, or you would add or delete from the code in this respect? As I started with Claude during the first question, maybe I can start with Steve this time.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think generally speaking, we think things have been working well. I mean, I think the experiences of last year, in particular, last sort of August, September time, when the markets were going crazy and huge spreads were developing between the market areas, was educational, but perhaps, well, hopefully not typical. And I think basically, the issue around what is technical capacity, what is capacity that can always be offered firm, is a challenging one. And the slide you put up, Nico, showing that we saw quite a number of instances of flows regularly exceeding technical capacity, suggests that perhaps the technical capacity had been set at the wrong level or at a conservative level. I mean, Article 6 of the CAM Network Code does include some provisions for how TSOs are supposed to work collaboratively with TSOs at the other side of the interconnection point. So it talks about trying to develop a joint method, talks about trying to undertake in-depth analysis. It talks about applying a dynamic approach to the calculation of or recalculation capacity. So the code, I think, already includes provisions to try to make sure that the technical capacity is offered in a consistent way, but we don't really know to what extent TSOs are doing that at interconnection points currently. I mean, maybe there's something through the interconnection agreement that requires them to discuss that, etc. But I think it perhaps does require more focus on those particular requirements in Article 6 to make sure that TSOs are trying to assess technical capacity in a similar way. And the concept of technical capacity, I think, should be what the capacity that can be made available under a sort of standard or typical market setup, not something that can always be delivered at all particular points in time, because that probably sets the bar too low.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you, Steve. Yeah, definitely. Well, actually, maybe the term technical capacity is a bit misleading when you read that the definition says that it's maximum firm capacity that can be offered. So maybe the term was not chosen right. So maybe changes are necessary in this respect. Claude, do you agree with Steve? And also, what would be your most important thing we need to change?
Yes, thank you. Yes, I agree with Steve, but I would like to start with a remark. I disagree, and I don't find it fair when you write, like in the report on Northwest Europe congestion, weakening of coordination leads to inefficiencies when maximizing capacity. You have to have in mind the big picture. From one day to the other, we lost the biggest supplier to Europe, and the whole gas value chain demonstrates its flexibility and reliability by shifting all the flow from east to west from east. And of course, this wasn't perfect. And I would like to quote the say, perfect is the enemy of the good. We have to have in mind the big picture, and then, of course, we can learn and we can still improve, but we were compliant with all the rules in the CAM Network Code and in the transparency guidelines. And so, of course, if you want to have more information on the transparency platform, you have to change the transparency guidelines to have a proper and correct changes. And here, again, I agree with Steve. We have to go to square one. What is the issue we would like to solve? Is it to reduce the length of the auction, and so we can play with the price step during the auction that represent the spreads? Is it to remove the unlimited interruptible capacity offer. GTS has changed that and learned from what happened during those auctions. But again, the whole value chain, the supplier, they chase the LNG all around the world. We developed 1,000 of new FSRU, new capacity for the first time. Gas was flowing from France to Germany. The storage were filled because of the Commission regulation and the filling obligation. The household reduced their consumption and the industry. So again, we can work on the CAM network code, but we have to have in mind the big picture. And then, yeah, I'm like Steve, I do not think that what is on the table are the right solution to solve the issue we would like to solve. Because introducing a new concept between firm and interruptible, we do not really understand what is meant by that. Is it that for each flow pattern, for each temperature, we will be able to know how much interruptible will become firm? So for me, this doesn't create new capacity. It just, it's already there in the interruptible capacity. Are shippers ready to pay something firm while before they were buying it at the price of interruptible? The same for the dynamic recalculation of capacity. Each network is different and it depends of all the entry and exit point of that network. And you cannot harmonize that kind of rules. And as put in the chat, bundling of interruptible capacity doesn't seem to be a good solution if there is not the same level of firm capacity on each side of the border. You are going to bundle that, preventing to match interruptible on one side with firm on the other side. And again, we are not in the content discussion today, but we should first start by what is the issue we would like to solve, and then we can discuss about the solution to put on the table, and we'll try to be perfect next time. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Claude. So I do get that the discussions on these aspects will be important, and that we need to be aware of the particularities of national networks. Maybe Nico, would you like to react to those two interventions, and before we can maybe go and pick questions from the Slido?
Yes, I will briefly react. I mean, okay. I can only acknowledge all the efforts that have been done by TSOs, and this is fully acknowledged that the market circumstances were really difficult. The flows have been rerouted. The market kept on working. I think that also Steve will agree with that. That the flows were happening still to where the gas was valued the most. It wasn't perfect, and what we try to do now, and I think it's the time to do, is to learn the lessons, to observe or take the observations we did and see what we can improve. This concept of technical capacity from the perspective of ACER and regulators, it does not contain all the information we would like to see, so we would like to improve that. If we can have a better way of offering the capacity, meaning in terms of firm, making it dynamic, also the frequency of updating that number is part of Article 6 already today. Maybe that needs to be refined and improved just to make sure that the market participants know what is the available capacity, that regulators know what is the potential of this system, how much gas can flow through it in an efficient way. Because of course, we're not only looking, and hopefully we will not have another crisis soon, but we're also looking at the longer term future and how the gas network will be used, and it must be used in the most efficient way possible. So we really like to improve coordination, so to have the best available information on capacity, the most possible capacity offered to the market, So this coordination and information seem two important aspects where we can take lessons from the crisis and hopefully can improve those areas.
Can I just very quickly mention a couple of other things from what you said? I mean, I think we should also be aware that when it comes to interruptible capacity, this is often being sold at pretty similar prices to firm capacity, or even at firm capacity and then being discounted if it is ever interrupted. So I mean, that almost sort of creates a bit of an incentive for a TSO to minimize the amount of firm capacity it offers and maximize the amount of interruptible capacity. So I think that's a potentially relevant factor here. And I think when it comes to changing the sort of technical capacity, yes, clearly, I think we as traders want the technical capacity to be clear and to be always reflect the maximum capability of flowing gas on the network. But we don't really like a situation where the technical capacity is changing regularly day by day, because the basis for how you actually bid for capacity in the various auctions depends on what you think the capacity available is. So if you bid at a premium for what you think is a certain level of capacity only to find it increases by 20% sort of a month later, then that's not a sort of very equitable situation from a booking perspective.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much, three of you, for this discussion. I just propose maybe that we review the questions in the Slido, because I see 11. We may not have time to answer them all. Maybe we will not even be able to provide a substantiated answer to all of them, but at least I propose that we can review, and those that merit further reflection can be noted, and we'll take them on board in our work for the amendment process. So just as a reminder, you can vote for the questions that you believe are most relevant or more interesting. So and they appear to us in that order. So the ones that get the more votes will be addressed first. So the first one I see, and I see the votes increasing, and now that I said so, is how can interruptible capacity be bundled, I guess, when there is still firm capacity on only one side of the IP? Who would get an answer for that?
I see Claude wants to react. I will quickly go first, if I may. Also, Steve hinted already at that. I think if there is firm capacity only on one side of the border, then the principle of bundling as much as possible has been followed already for the firm capacity. And then indeed, it may not be easy to bundle these two different products with different qualities. So I'd say we have to explore if that is possible, but I'm interested to hear Claude's views on this.
You're muted.
Claude, you're muted.
Yeah, I don't think it makes sense. It's what I've explained during my intervention. If you have firm available on one side, you are not going to bundle this part with this part and prevent the bundling of interruptible with firm on the other side. So, yeah, I don't think it's a good idea.
Okay, thank you. The next question is an actor that finds that ACER's proposal to introduce a non-static, I guess you mean a dynamic maximum flow capacity, an interesting idea, yet it says it implies, however, that if a most likely flow scenario does not materialize, flows may need to be curtailed. And the question is, how does ACER propose to deal with capacity calculation according to, for instance, the Article 11, paragraph 6 of the Network Code?
I will go first, since this is addressed to ACER's proposals and views expressed in the special congestion report. The idea here is to have a better concept of this flow potential and that improved notion of technical capacity. And when we say non-static, it means dynamic, as you rightfully said so, Edouard, meaning it can be updated in time. So when we are shorter or closer to the real time where the flow will happen, so this is going from a year ahead to a quarter, monthly, daily, within day, I assume that we have better information to offer firm day-ahead capacity than what is maybe possible at the yearly level. So that's the idea behind. So still to offer that firm capacity for the shorter term, where you have more information on the most likely flow, that information needs to be robust. That's clear, because indeed, if it's offered as firm capacity, we do not want to see it interrupted. But perhaps it's possible to offer more firm capacity on a daily or a monthly basis than is possible on a yearly basis when there is still more uncertainty in the market.
Yes. Claude, you wanted to also add to this answer?
Yeah, but here it's a workshop on the scoping exercise, but yeah, we should really discuss what is the issue we would like to solve. Because for me, indeed, you know the nomination day ahead, you know the weather forecast, so you know how much interruptible will not be interrupted or will be firm. But what's the point of transforming that interruptible into firm? It will not create new capacity. And it's what Steve said, it will be a nightmare to set aside 20% of the capacity that is changing every day for long-term, for short-term option, and what will be the visibility for the market. So again, what is the issue we would like to solve?
Yeah, if I just jump in, I mean, I agree. I think we need to be clear on exactly what we're trying to address here. I mean, I perhaps refer you to the sort of baseline capacity concept that exists in the UK, where National Grid are required to make available at entry and exit points capacity, which they can't always make available firm. They have to make firm capacity available at levels that they can't always deliver under every flow scenario. So those are numbers which are sort of established, published in their license, if I remember rightly, so they don't actually change. And National Grid or National Gas, I should say, can in some cases happily flow at that level. In some cases they can't. And then if they can't, there's a process of capacity buyback and potential congestion management measures they can use. And they have an incentive scheme to effectively minimize the cost of that. So that concept exists in the UK, and I think is generally quite welcomed and supported. I have severe doubts whether we can roll that concept across the whole of Europe and reapply a definition of technical capacity. But you know, I think that gets to the heart of what we're talking about here. There will be cases where you know, TSOs are able to pretty regularly offer a level of firm capacity which they can happily sell, but under certain circumstances they may not be able to make that capacity available. And then the question is, well, what do they then do about it? You know, in an ideal world, you sell the capacity firm, you make that capacity available, people buy it on a firm basis, rather than set your your technical capacity low and then just sort of deliver the rest through interrupt capacity. But I think it's a question of identifying what it is we think the problem is and trying to think about how best to address that.
Well, thank you, Stephen. Actually, there's a question directly asked for you in the chat, which actually is very dynamic as questions move quite often. So, question for Ifet. Do you share the following approach? The goal of the CAN network code seems to be to maximize capacity bundling. Our clients, I don't know who is speaking, so I guess it's cheaper, say they want gas to flow freely between markets. Buying capacity is a mean. The goal should be to allow capacity to be used when relevant to trade gas. Do you share this view?
Yeah, to a large extent I do. I think I may know who asked the question as well, but I won't put them on the spot. Yeah, I mean, as I said before, I think we appreciate and like the concept of bundling, and the algorithm that currently sort of matches what's available either side and offers the lowest number as a firm capacity product and allows the rest to be offered an unbundled basis is, I think, is effective. Maybe that unbundled capacity will be booked, maybe it won't, but it's important that that capacity is made available in the market as well. And depending on the sort of circumstances, there may be a greater need for sort of unbundled capacity because of legacy arrangements that exist either side of the interconnection point or not. So, I mean, clearly you wouldn't actively go out and book unbundled capacity if you couldn't use it. People aren't buying it just for the sake of buying it, but making it available allows the potential for counterparties to book that capacity and use it to flow gas. And the important thing is, as I think is the question mentioned, it's ensuring that gas flows effectively between market areas, and that involves a combination of bundled and unbundled capacity.
Okay, thank you, Steve. I don't really know if we can continue very long with the questions. Please stop me when we need to go to the following session. The next question that appears on my screen is related to interruptible capacity. Wouldn't an alternative to increasing technical capacity be identifying different levels of interruptibility? This might in part help with the issue of the other questions. Maybe you're referring here to products like conditional capacity, which is offered at some IPs in the EU, but not in the majority of cases. Nico, would you like to react? Because I know conditional capacity is among our topics.
I would have the same reaction as you, that this is very similar to what would be a conditional product, which already exists in some markets, in few markets. It can be a way, again, to optimize the offering of capacity. Of course, we need to make sure that we don't turn all firm capacity into some form of conditional capacity. I'll keep it at that in view of time, and maybe there is just enough time for Claude to give a short reaction as well.
Yes, please, Claude.
Thank you. So it's like the previous point on the bundling, the matching of on the two sides of the IP. It's always the same thing. It's certainty versus flexibility. And if you want to have everything sure, we will reduce commercially what technically and physically we can do. And so we should keep flexibility, and maybe we should not describe everything. If some capacity are interruptible because of the flow pattern, some capacity are interruptible because of the temperature, the outside temperature. But if we have to write all that, the system may become too rigid. But yeah, to be discussed next year.
Yes.
And very
Okay.
quickly, just from me, I mean, you know, we conditional capacity exists. It's not going to go anytime soon, but we're certainly not in favour of increasing the number or the opportunities of conditional capacity. We very much favour a black and white, firm and interruptible approach, and conditional capacity is effectively interruptible capacity, and providing you know the conditions associated with its interruption, it could potentially be sold as interruptible capacity. So, you know, we're not keen on increasing the complexity of capacity and finding new conditions which may or may not trigger interruption. It's all very much about us trying to maximize the amount of firm capacity, and you know, we sort of support the idea of overselling and buyback, so TSOs can effectively buy back capacity if they've you know, sold capacity that they're not able to deliver on a firm basis under a very specific condition, for example. But yeah, that's not effectively working in the market at the moment.
Okay, so you're in favor of retaining firm and interruptible and having efficient CMPs applied rather than diversifying the variety of capacity products.
Very much so, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Do we have time for other questions?
I think it's time for a coffee.
Ah, okay. Well, so sorry for those who didn't hear their questions addressed. What is sure is that we will take note of them for our future work, and so it's not your questions are not lost. Thank you very much for posting those questions. It's really important for us to hear your say during this workshop, and there will be 2 other sessions, and so 2 other Q&A sessions after the break. See you in 10 minutes.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
See you in a minute.
Yeah. Hello again, everyone. The break is over. I hope you were able to take a quick coffee. We don't want to be too late, so we will start now again the workshop and jump to session 2, which is dedicated to topics regarding improvement of capacity allocation. So this session mainly addresses the topics and proposals that you could find in our joint ACER-ENTSOG issue solution paper to respond to the proposals posted by IFET on the functionality platform in 2020. So it mainly focuses on these topics, but it is not limited to these topics only. So any other topics that would fall under this category would be treated under this session. And so under the Q&A session, if you have any questions or any topics that you would like to raise, in addition to these ones which appear on screen, please do not hesitate to do so. The first topic regards additional booking opportunities for market participants. This is, of course, at the heart of IFET's proposals, and this is one of the proposals we dedicated most of our time to these last few years when TSOs and NRAs were discussing the different options. So the issue regarding booking opportunities is that market participants currently only have 17 booking windows or auction windows for what I would call long-term capacity products. So 1 auction date for yearly products, 4 auction dates for quarterly products, and 12 auction dates for monthly products. And actually, for yearly products, market participants can book these yearly products up to 15 years in advance. And since the revision of the CAM network code in 2017, where the offer of quarterly product was amended, market participants can book all 4 quarterly products right after the yearly auction which happens in July. But with regards to monthly products, market participants can only buy these monthly products a few days before these products start. So these issues were discussed, and the proposals that we made jointly with ENTSOG are the following ones. First, as proposed by EFET, to introduce additional auctions via, using the uniform price algorithm after each of the yearly, quarterly, and monthly auctions, which are led using the ascending clock algorithm. The idea being that any firm capacity not sold during these ACAs would be made available via UPA. Our proposed temporality would be to have these additional auctions on a weekly basis, and our proposal was to have them on Thursdays, in particular to allow sufficient time for ACAs to run. Our second proposal, and this one deals more precisely with monthly products, would be to replicate what we did in 2017 with quarterly products and apply it to monthly products. That is to say, after the auctions for quarterly products, the 3 monthly products within this particular quarter would be made available at the start of the quarter, sorry. And one rule that we discussed will be that once a product has been offered via the UPA algorithm, it can no longer be offered back using the ACA algorithm. So these are our proposals regarding this topic of additional booking opportunities for market participants. The second topic would be to improve the efficiency of the ascending clock auction algorithm, ACA. We have seen these past few years, and in particular during the months of the gas supply crisis, that the ACA can take a very long time to allocate capacity, and in some instances, it actually wasn't able to allocate capacity at all, given that no more time was available to allocate capacity. So how it works now under ACA, you have successive bidding rounds, which are launched with price steps, small price step and high price step, until the volume of capacity demanded is at least equals the offer of capacity. And the level of those price steps that allow a demand and offer to converge, they can only be set before the start of the auction. But the issue is that at the moment TSOs jointly decide on the level of these price steps, the market conditions may be very different from those that you will see during the auction process. So these can lead to very long ACA processes and to inefficient capacity allocation. So our proposal in this respect would be first to allow TSOs to jointly decide at a given IP, and once the auction has started, to amend these price steps levels between rounds, not during a round, because market participants need to know the rules before the round is launched, in order we can accommodate more easily changing market conditions during the auction. A second proposal that we included in our paper is to provide maybe for a termination deadline for ACAs. The aim here would be to allow TSOs to decide that, okay, by this deadline, the ACA should stop. The aim being that the additional auctions via UPA that we may decide to propose can be launched. And you know that UPA is a much faster and more efficient way to allocate capacity. The next important topic for us is the allocation rules for interruptible capacity products. Today, the rule is that interruptible capacity products can only be offered once firm capacity has been sold out. So it means that in many cases, when there are small volumes of firm capacity available, TSOs cannot trigger auctions for interruptible capacity, although there might be a big interest for this interruptible capacity. So maybe this rule should be reviewed. Also, another rule is that interruptible capacity products are offered to the market using the same algorithm as the corresponding firm capacity products. So ascending clock auction for yearly, quarterly, and monthly products, and UPA for interruptible day-ahead products. And also, we consider that the auction calendar as of today provides a limited number of days for interruptible capacity auctions. The number of days available is quite reduced compared to firm capacity. So our proposals in this regard is that any amendments, and in particular, I have in particular in mind the fact that we may add auction dates using UPA. These amendments should safeguard the possibility for TSOs to launch interruptible capacity auctions in good conditions. The second one would be to the fact that adding UPAs, as they will ensure firm capacity will be allocated, they will likely have the effect of triggering more often the offer of interruptible capacity, because there will be more cases where firm capacity is sold out. And also, our last proposal would be maybe to check whether it's not more appropriate to use UPA from the start to offer all interruptible capacity products in the interest of time. And I will leave the floor now to my colleague from ENTSOG, Carolina Golonka, who will follow the presentation with a few more topics. Please, Carolina, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Eduardo. Good morning, everyone. While talking about those proposals that Edward just presented, we were also discussing the set-aside rule, which is currently set in the CAM Article 8.6 and 8.7. Regarding putting aside the given amount of the minimum amount of the existing technical capacity to be offered in the shorter term auctions for the shorter term products. We would like this set aside rule to be kept, and we believe that it should be kept under the new setup of CAM and after introducing new additional auctions. And while discussing how it could be done, there has been also considered that there might be need to revise the currently existing set aside rule to avoid selling out capacity for short-term products. Because, as you know, according to the cascading rule principle, there is the auction starts from the longer-term products and going into shorter-term products. And what is currently said in CAM is that minimum amount of 10% of the existing technical capacity should be offered for the first time in the yearly auction during the 5th gas year preceding the start of the relevant gas year. And then the second one is this minimum 10% of existing technical capacity offered for the first time in the quarterly auction during the gas year preceding the start of the relevant gas year. This is this like minimum 10% threshold, and the threshold that is in fact set aside is decided by on a member state basis, and it is decided after the consultation of stakeholders and together with NRAs. The next following issues that we were discussing. So first one is more of a technical one, is to realign the auction calendar, and also it is in the definition section also, because currently the auction calendar covers the period from March to February, which was also the period before the CAM network code revision of 2017. And after this revision, the order of cascading auctions was moved to the currently existing one, so from July till June. So the first auction of the yearly product, I mean the auction of the yearly product, so the longer term product is done in July. Therefore, we would propose to adjust currently existing auction calendar and for it to run from July until June. The second one, which was also broadly supported during the consultation, and was the closing hour of the within-day product. So we would to move it to a little bit earlier hour. To 9 to 21 of winter time, to give more time for the network users to acknowledge their capacity allocation, and also to give some additional time for TSOs for the system maintenance during the night. We have also received the feedback that from the perspective of some shippers, it would be good to make such change because it would allow them to balance their portfolios on IPs. And the next change that we have proposed, Edward said about these additional options for the bookings of longer term products. However, we were also discussing the possibility of advanced booking of day ahead products, because currently there is very limited horizon for such bookings, and the capacity of the period of 1 day can be booked just the day ahead. So during the FUNC process, we have discussed different options, and for the proposal, two options were sort of proposed to be discussed, considered further. So first one, I will maybe start with 7 days ahead, is it is basically proposing to base the auction on the currently existing day-ahead products. However, to enable market to book for 7 days ahead, but it would be like maximum of 7 days ahead. However, towards the end of the month, number of days will be decreasing. The next one, the other option was balance of the month product. So it was proposed to introduce new standardized product like yearly, like we have now yearly, quarterly, monthly, etc. And this new standardized product would be allowing to book for the rest of the days until the end of the month. We also like while discussing that, we found that the introduction of the product would bring also several implications for product algorithm as well as pricing, meaning the multipliers from tariff network code. Yes, so that would be it from my side. I will now give floor back to Edward. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Carolina. We have one last topic to discuss before the panel discussion, and this topic is very important and I believe interesting for all of us. Is the topic of the degree of flexibility we want to have in CAM rules. Until now, the rules which are laid down in the CAM network codes offer very limited room for deviation. It's the least to say. I think the only rule that we can deviate from, and actually it's something that ENTSOG can do, is to pick different auction dates if the default dates maybe end up on a bank holiday, for instance. But this is basically the only parameter that can be deviated from. And so to us, this means that the CAM network code is very rigid and actually poorly adaptable to changing market conditions, and also poorly adaptable to the changing needs of stakeholders. And this is something that we saw during the gas crisis, that some of the rules that we may have wanted to change and to adapt in order to have smoother capacity allocation during the crisis, this was not possible. And what we, however, see is that the very fact that these rules cannot be adapted quickly contravenes with the provisions of the gas regulation itself, which states in its Article 16 that capacity allocation mechanisms shall be, I quote, flexible and capable of adapting to evolving market circumstances. So in the joint paper we published with ENTSOG, we included this, what we call the flexibility clause, that we would like to discuss. We know it's legally difficult to introduce such a clause, but we believe it should be at least discussed and investigated how we could introduce such a possibility. The idea would, of course, not be for ACER to be able to change everything within the CAM rules. The idea would be to safeguard the key principles, but only include in the way the code and articles of the code are written, the possibility for us to assess and to also consult on evolutions from one year to the other on very specific and selected rules and parameters. For instance, the duration of bidding runs, it's something that we may one day want to change. The temporality, if in the end additional auctions are added, we may want to change the temporality from weekly to twice a week or maybe reduce it. I don't know. The idea here would be to provide for this possibility. The ultimate idea would being that we want this code and these rules to be more future-proof than they currently are. So this is the idea. And of course, all those topics that Carolina and I presented, I invite you to comment on them during the consultation process and during the Q&A session that is following in a few seconds to maybe raise additional points or say that you consider that some of our topics should be disregarded. So in the last slide, we just put the articles which are you should consider on these topics. So I will hand over the floor to Nico, who will be this time not a panelist but moderating the panel discussion and selecting the questions that I see you rose in the chat. Please, Nico.
Thank you, Edouard. And to make sure we have plenty of time to address questions, I can already save time on introducing the panelists. It will be Steve again, and Carolina and Edouard will also be here to address the questions. Before going into the questions that I see coming in the Slido tool, let me just ask one more general question, and I would start with Steve, as you had a rest while Carolina and Edouard were presenting. And I would like you to highlight again, similar as for the first session, what you think would be the key aspect to change or to delete, to add. Many proposals have been discussed, but maybe there is something that you feel is really important to, again, in the spirit of improving the market functioning. What in the context of offering capacity, how to do that, what would be the main thing, the priority for you to change?
Okay, thank you, Nico. Yeah, well, I think it's fairly clear. I mean, we, as EFET, raised a FUNC request nearly 4 years ago now, suggesting that there should be more flexibility built into the capacity allocation process. I mean, I think, you know, we talked earlier about the process, and I think it's the code has achieved a lot and harmonized a lot, and that's a good thing. But as you mentioned, there are only 17 windows in the year where you can book capacity in excess of a day. And what we have seen, and you referred to it during the crisis, but certainly we saw it before then, that there's been occasions where the spreads between markets would support capacity being booked at a point in time where capacity isn't available, and then come the time the auction comes around, the windows open, the spreads have changed, and the commercial incentive to book capacity to move product between country A and country B has disappeared. So you end up not selling the capacity, which is why we thought, okay, well, let's keep the core allocation process that's in place that everybody knows, that everybody's become accustomed to, but let's try and introduce some flexibility by allowing capacity to be sold on a uniform price allocation basis, which is a far quicker and simpler mechanism. You don't have to go through a number of rounds, etc. It's a single round with a clearing price based on the best bids. Let's open that opportunity for traders, shippers, customers to buy capacity outside of those set windows. So once the annual auction is closed, let's introduce the possibility of annual capacity then being bought on a regular basis through UPA auctions between July, which is when it first goes on sale, which is quite a significant time before the actual capacity is being used, up until the point where the capacity becomes usable. And the same applies to quarterly, and the same applies to monthly products. So we were keen to keep the cascading principle in place. And I think what ACER has come up, where ACER and ENTSOG have come up with in the solution to the FUNC proposal is a good step forward. It's not quite what we were suggesting, but it's, I think, workable, and I think it's a positive step that will allow more capacity to be available at the market at times where the market values that capacity and wants to buy it. And that's a good thing for TSOs ultimately, because more capacity should be sold, because we know that there certainly has been many occasions where capacity hasn't been sold because at the point in time when the auction opened, the spreads don't support that. So that's our key message from the slides you presented there. There's a lot of other things in there which we support, but the key element is making more capacity available on a flexible basis.
Okay, Carolina, would you like to react to this? Add anything? Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I agree with what Steve said, and that the current CAM rules brought a lot of harmonization, and there are certain principles like cascading rule, etc., that should be kept, as they have proved to be efficient and beneficial for the market. From our perspective, I would like to say we've presented these proposal together with ACER, and we are waiting for the market feedback, and subject to further CB analysis and consultations and assessments, we are willing to implement it. However, I would like to also underline there's been several options proposed under this FUNC solution. And there are two issues that has been actually brought up in the chat discussion, as I've noticed, regarding this balance of the month product. At the end of the process, or maybe in the final version of the process, we also started discussing this option of the auction of balance of month instead of the balance of month product, because as it's been assessed that the balance of month product will have impact on the tariff multipliers, etc. So it has been also discussed, and it is also an option which hasn't been, however, brought to the final proposal, as it was sort of discussed on the latest stage. But it can be maybe discussed again. And the second thing, regarding the price step, there is also a possibility to maybe adjust the price step already beforehand, based on the spreads between the hubs, instead of changing the price step after the auction commenced. However, as I've said, and what is our position is that we are open to any changes that might be beneficial for the market. However, we would just underline that further analysis is needed, and also those changes will require costs and implementation time, because since there will be some changes to the system, we need to make sure that every shipper is well informed and knows how to function under the newly applied rules. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolina. And I will already start taking some questions, Eduardo, and if you want, you can still add a reaction. And one that popped up very quickly during the presentation, and I think it's more for clarification, is that you wrote, once a product has been offered via the uniform price allocation, it cannot no longer be offered via the ascending clock algorithm. Please explain why.
Yes, thank you, Nico, for putting this to me. I didn't see the questions when they popped up during my presentation. So yes, this is something that we discussed with TSOs when we were designing our proposals. So in a system in which you not only have ACS to offer yearly, quarterly, and monthly products, but you also have UPAs that can be triggered after that. And also in a system in which you not only offer quarterly products in advance, but also monthly products in advance, which is one of our proposals. The idea would be that once you have offered, I don't know, the month of January under ACA, if in the coming days you offer it using UPA, you won't be able to offer it again using ACA. It looked not only complex, but weird to TSOs and NRAs to jump back to the ascending clock auction. You may, of course, not agree with us, and so I invite you to explain your point of view in your response to the public consultation, explaining why you believe this wouldn't be an interesting rule.
Thank you.
Were there any other clarifications that I could provide, or Carolina, of course? Maybe the other questions are not clarification ones.
There are some interesting questions that I would like to raise to the panel. And the first one, it will come to you again, Edouard, and I would also like Steve's view. It is adding additional many UPA auction for the same product and runtime is a significant step towards first come, first service methodology, according to the question raiser. Such methodology prefers bigger market players. Is it a goal of regulators?
Okay,
so I would
absolutely
like your view
not.
and also Steve, as you know best the differences between market players.
Okay, if I can just provide clarification here also. So I don't know if you remember, but I think it was last year we conducted a public consultation and a workshop on the different options that were on the table. And one of the questions were, if we were to introduce additional auctions using UPA, what would be your preferred temporality to offer those additional UPA? So some answered once a week, others twice a week, daily, some even answered all day long. And so I believe, of course, had we proposed to have the shop open all day long using UPA, this, of course, would have looked like a first come, first serve. I think it's not the case with the proposal we brought forward. If you offer only one UPA a week, I personally don't consider it's comparable to a first come, first serve auction of products. I don't know whether Steve agrees or has different view, but I think it's a quite balanced proposal between not offering anything else and providing additional opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, I think, first come, first serve is what we had before, and the CAM code has moved us away from that. And I think there's a lot of benefits resulting from the CAM code. So I wouldn't want to go back to a first come, first served process, or I wouldn't. I mean, there's probably quite a few people in our trading office that would quite like that, but we recognise why the CAM code was put in place, and as long as the process is efficient, then I think that's the best way forward. So Edouard talked about the regularity of the uniform price auctions. We had suggested in our response that you could look at a sort of daily offering of UPA auctions, and ACER and ENTSOG have rode back on that a bit and suggested, well, actually doing it on a more sort of less frequent basis, on a sort of once a week basis, is more consistent with the sort of regular availability of an offering of capacity, rather than the having auctions open all the time. So I think there is that distinction, or that restriction around how frequently you can hold these auctions is relevant here. And I think they talked about large players. Well, large players, I don't know whether they necessarily benefit from first come, first serve, or from you know, weekly uniform prices more than any other counterparty or any other player in the market. But, you know, when you see spreads of sort of 20 euros a megawatt hour developing between countries, you can rest assured that sort of all players in the market will be looking to get their hands on capacity there, whether they be large, small, or whatever. So I think if everybody knows how the rules work and everybody is able to implement those changes within a reasonable time, then market participants will react, and that's small, medium, and large.
Thank you, Steve. I see then there is a question that I think is a bit beyond the scope of what this panel wants to address, but I will still take it in full transparency. It's about that ACER is not a legislative body and should not become one. I think this is not what we try to do. The process for making these amendments is described in the regulation. ACER has a role to play, but in the end, this network code and any amendment of it will be adopted through the comitology process by the legislators. What we try to do is have an inclusive process where we want to take on board the input from all of you, hoping to make the best recommendations possible. Edouard, if you want to add on that.
Yes, thank you. I read this question maybe from a different angle. Maybe the person that raised it reacted to our proposal of flexibility, the flexibility clause. Maybe it considers that any amendment, whatever its nature, should not lie in the hands of ACER, but should keep being in the hands of the Commission, and any change, however small it is, should undergo the comitology process. Well, this is why I said that this proposal could be challenging from a legal perspective. We know that. Still, we believe that small changes should be able to be made quickly. And when I say quickly, I'm not saying from 1 month to the other or during a given gas year, but from one gas year to the other. And I don't believe it's very efficient for small changes to be made to wait 3, 4, 5 years. For big ones, for substantial changes, yes, of course, legislators should be in the room, but for very detailed and very technical rules, or very small rules such as dates in the calendar, maybe this is not necessary. So this is clearly a discussion that we need to initiate and assess and see which degree of flexibility we can include in this code. Also having in mind the degree of flexibility that other network codes, not only in gas but also in electricity, have.
See, also Carolina wants to react.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to agree with what Edward said and add to that this is like initial proposal to sort of see the market feedback. And of course, like some flexibility would be welcome. However, in case this proposal is further developed, it will need to have clear framework, triggers for it, and some safeguards. So it's not that we want to change the role of ACER. The proposal is about creating some possibility, however, within like defined framework. So that's what I wanted to ask. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolina. And clearly, everything that we will propose will be within the boundaries of our mandate and legislation. Then I will take next question, and it will be for Carolina and maybe also Steve. Amending price steps during an auction might be conceptually interesting. However, wouldn't changing the rules of the game during the game be both confusing for shippers and operationally challenging for TSOs? Carolina, if you want to go first.
Okay, thank you. Yes, it has its cons, of course, and it has its challenges, and it's both for TSOs and shippers. That's why we're sort of also saying that there are some alternatives, such as, for example, a possibility of calculation, like adjustment of the price step based on some data that we have, like spreads between hubs. So yeah, I agree that there will be some challenges in case such a possibility is implemented, and like changing the rules of the game during the game, so to speak, might happen if it's not correctly designed.
Steve, from the perspective of shippers.
Yeah, I mean, it's not something we would envisage being used very often, but we have seen situations where ascending clock auctions have been launched, and it's very clear right from the very first round that the large price step is wrong, and that this auction is going to go and get run and run and run because the large price step hasn't been set at a level that reflects the spreads at the time the auction's held. Now that's partly perhaps because the large price step has to be determined in some cases 30 days before the actual auction is held. So maybe there's something that you could do to actually bring the date forward to the point in time when the auction starts. But if the price step is clearly wrong, then I think we would accept some sort of mechanism to change it during the auction, providing that's clear to everybody, so everybody is able to know this is a possibility everywhere. Everybody is alerted to the fact that this is going to happen, and that it perhaps happens at the beginning of a day rather than sort of midday after the sort of the second auction round of the day before the third and fourth. So I think if you sort of set parameters around it and everybody's clear about how it would work, then it would be helpful in situations where TSOs still get those large price steps wrong. I mean, at the end of the day, if we're also talking about the possibility of having a deadline to terminate the the ascending clock auction in order for UPA auctions to start consistently across Europe at a certain time, then perhaps you don't need it. But what it probably means is that you run through your however many rounds or however many days of ascending clock auction and no capacity is allocated, which I think will be a missed opportunity. So we would be prepared to sort of have some sort of process in place, providing it's clear and everybody understands how it works.
Thank you, Steve. And then I will take one more question. In case a yearly ACA is terminated to provide an additional UPA, where is the advantage? If one can buy the same runtime in the upcoming 4-quarter auctions, the higher multiplier seems to be a weak argument because the willingness to pay of the markets is very high in such a situation. Who would like to take a go at this?
I can have a go. Yeah, I mean, essentially you say that you can buy it again in the next runtime. Well, I suppose in theory you can, but the next runtime can be some significant time after the annual auction. So you have your annual auction at the beginning of July, you have your first quarterly auction where potentially you could then buy 4 quarters worth of capacity first Monday in August. So between that period of time, the spreads between market areas can change, and the same applies between the quarterly and the monthly auctions. So what this is doing, it's not taking away the ability for people to buy capacity under the ascending clock mechanism as we know and love it today. It's just adding another opportunity for people to buy that capacity before the capacity becomes available to use. So if nobody buys the capacity in the UPA auctions, then it all cascades through to the 4 quarterly auctions that are held in the next round, similar with quarterly and monthly capacity. So we're not changing anything that's currently within the CAM code. We're just supplementing it with additional possibilities to buy capacity through a different mechanism that will, I think, help the market and help market participants buy capacity when it's actually commercially attractive to do so, which they can't always do at the moment.
Edouard, with the last reaction before I close this session.
Yes, sorry, just I found this last question a bit weird. I expect a market participant that enters into the yearly capacity under ACA its goal is to acquire capacity. So our proposal is clearly to allow capacity to be allocated in the end of this process. If you enter into a yearly capacity auction, you're clearly interested in having this yearly product. Of course, in normal conditions, if not all firm capacity is allocated at yearly, it will flow to shorter-term capacity products such as quarterly and then monthly. But in situations where the ACA is unable to allocate capacity, yearly capacity in this example, because the market conditions are tricky, then we see merit in having a rule somewhere that says that, okay, if TSOs see that it's obvious that no capacity will be allocated in due time, given the price steps level, then it should be allowed to terminate it and launch the UPA to allow those market participants to have access to those yearly capacity contracts.
Thank you to all of you and to the participants who raised the questions. I will close the session here. If we have some time in the final Q&A session, we can pick up some of these questions, also the questions of session 1. But I would like to now move on to the third session when I take control. And this third session, I will give a brief introduction again, and it's covering a number of other aspects that we could not find a clear common denominator for session 1 and session 2, but we still find it meaningful to share with you that there are potential areas of improvements related to these aspects. So that's why we are presenting them here today. There will be a Q&A session where Edouard and I will try to answer your questions, but I would also invite all the other panelists from the previous sessions to open the camera and potentially contribute if they have views to share. And again, we can pick up some questions if there is time remaining from the previous sessions. So what other aspects might there be? One of them is implicit allocation. And I've seen a couple of times questions popping up regarding implicit allocation also during the previous Q&A sessions. What we have in mind here is that today implicit allocation is already possible. It's foreseen in the network code. But what we would like to maybe strengthen or improve is the alignment with the key principles and which aspects are really important to be preserved all the time. As you know, there is also a large possibility to declare inapplicable certain provisions from the network code, whereas others have to be maintained at all times. For instance, one element that we would like to perhaps improve is this bundling principle, because of course, if implicit allocation is done at only one side of the border, that may not be easy to respect. So this is one element of another issue that we may have some ideas or where there is room for some improvement. A second element or a second chapter that is actually in the current network code is the incremental capacity. And we have observed through our monitoring exercises carried out both by ENTSOG and by ACER that the capacity that has been developed through this process of incremental capacity, so it's a market-based process, it has not been very successful so far. In the first two cycles, no capacity was developed through this process, and in the third incremental capacity process cycle, where ENTSOG recently published their monitoring report. Again, no capacity has been developed, but one project is still ongoing, so there is the possibility that maybe some capacity would still be developed. So this process is quite burdensome. So what we could try to do here is reduce that burden. Maybe it could be in reviewing the frequency of the cycle, also making sure that whatever demand indication is submitted, that it has some credibility. But we also have to take into account the future of the gas network and the future gas consumption. So to make sure that whatever demand indication is there is really robust. Another element on the table is whether we should keep the incremental capacity process at all. This could also be considered, not to reinsert it. There is also the legal implication that we have after the European Court ruled on one of the cases. And so this needs to be reinserted anyway at the time of the adoption of the decarbonization package and the new legislation. So we put this on the table. It's for further discussion, and of course we are very keen to hear your views on whether these are indeed areas of improvement, or you are happy with how these things are handled today in the network code. And the last other aspect that we have is the booking platforms. Today, all interconnection points have a booking platform where the capacity is offered, but the selection process in few cases lacked some efficiency. It was not easy to agree between the TSOs which booking platform to select. And in that case, there is a process foreseen where first the national regulatory authorities step in, and in a second stage, also ACER might be called to take a decision. We clearly see this as commercial relations, so we would like to review how and when this regulatory involvement is needed and under what rules, just to make sure that this is an efficient process, and also allowing, of course, TSOs and booking platform operators to engage into commercial relationships on their own terms. So just because if you address the public consultation, you will see that also these aspects are covered in the ACER scoping document. And if you have questions on these, we would be happy to take them. This is a very brief overview. There might be some other smaller elements in the scoping document, and also other improvements that we may consider that are more of an editorial nature. They are not always fully reflected. But if you have views on other areas of improvement, please participate in the public consultation and raise them there. That brings me to the end of this brief introduction, and then we can go to the Q&A session, where I invite all the previous speakers to participate. And we would first take questions on these other topics, but also, if there is time, then go into the unaddressed questions of the previous sessions. So the questions are popping in. I will ask Edouard if you had a look already while I was speaking.
Well, very quickly, there is one question that got several likes regarding incremental capacity process. So it says, if there is no longer an ink process, shouldn't there at least be an obligation to check the elimination of bottlenecks at IPs where demand exceeds supply?
Maybe I can react on this. So the incremental capacity process had as the major benefit, and it has already been emphasized before, that it offers a harmonized process on how to do this assessment of the market-based interest in capacity expansion. The pure obligation to check for market interest is already part of the directives and the regulations. So that would still be an element that has to be carried out by TSOs. And of course, physical congestion, where it is structural, would still need to be addressed, keeping in mind, of course, that we want an efficient use of capacity and that we should be mindful of not investing in capacity that will not have a very long future. So always the future demand needs to be checked and assessed if this is a robust demand and if the congestion is structural.
Yes, I confirm what Nico said. There has already been similar processes at each national area. The only thing that would disappear with the incremental capacity process chapter, if it were to disappear, would be a loss in harmonization and foreseeability in the way the processes are launched. Okay,
If
sorry.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
you can jump in.
If I may, also on the incremental chapter, we're also like discussing it internally here with our members, and the process as it is for now, it's it's quite complicated, and it brings a lot of administrative tasks for TSOs. That's why it would be good for it to be made on a voluntary basis, and it would be good for it to be simplified, to sort of like make the process more efficient and less burdensome. However, it might be good to have some process, but as a voluntary process purely in the CAM, in the network code, as it is market-based process. So that would be some general rules that could be used in case there is a need for such a process to be triggered. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. There is another question, which is actually, I think, very much related to the one we already provided an answer to. What would be the alternative process according to ACER for future capacity development if the ink process would be scrapped, as there would be the need for capacity expansion in some areas due to new realities and even under decarbonization targets? I think we broadly answered. Even if this chapter would disappear, there would still be rules in the regulation that will apply to TSOs in this respect. But again, maybe the chapter will not disappear, and maybe we just made a bit simpler and a bit less cumbersome for TSOs in particular. Nico would like to pick other questions.
I will just go with the next one. Couldn't auction premiums be used to increase the supply of the corresponding IPs? I take this as using those congestion revenues to address the physical congestion. And this is currently foreseen as one of the ways to use this auction premia. So that money that is collected, it's actually part of the tariff network code that specifies how these revenues can be used. And one of them is to address the structural physical congestion that, of course, is the cause or the source of these revenues. It's one of the options.
Yes, and I believe it's been used by some member states and TSOs to finance or to partly finance investments, in particular, given the sometimes very significant amounts of auction premia, which were collected by TSOs at some IPs this last few years. So either to finance the additional infrastructure or expand existing infrastructure or reduce tariffs.
Yeah, just wanted to comment on that. I mean, yes, that is an option to use the congestion rent towards increasing the physical capacity. You know, there are some significant amounts of money sloshing around in reconciliation accounts with some TSOs at the moment, which it's not particularly clear to shippers how that money is going to be spent. So, I mean, that's there is the option of giving some of that money back to market participants through various different mechanisms, which doesn't seem to be particularly thoroughly explored by TSOs. So we recognise that, yes, that congestion rent could be used for physical expansion, but when it sort of sits in a regulatory account for possibly using 5 years down the line, it doesn't give us a great deal of courage or transparency over what's happening to that money. So I think it's a transparency issue as well that we need to think about.
Yeah, thank you. The next question, which got a lot of votes actually, regards another topic which you touched upon, Nico, in your presentation. It's the implicit allocation. The comment says that implicit allocation works well where it is used currently. For instance, I guess in Belgium, but also at Baltic Connector, if I'm right. And the optionality in the rules allow a TSO to design a product that works for their market in agreement with NRAs and the adjacent TSO. So what is the intention behind adding prescriptiveness?
I do not think we want to add prescriptiveness, but more clarify where maybe it's not fully clear, also to help implementing this solution where it is being considered, so that there can be agreement between the involved TSOs and regulatory authorities in how to do it and to make sure that we improve the market functioning. But for sure, we do not intend to be more prescriptive on a tool that allows a lot of flexibility and has a role to play.
Yeah, I think our intention here is that any such scheme would not jeopardize the core regulatory principles that we discussed already, and actually bundling is one of these principles, and one of the topics that we find maybe is insufficiently, maybe not as clearly depicted in the code with regard to implicit allocation as we might want it to be. Yes, Steve.
Yeah, perhaps if I just jump in here as well. I mean, you know, implicit allocation is being used successfully in the Baltics, and that's in relation to, you know, the market merger that happens there. So it's been possible to use it similar to how it's used in the electricity market there as part of a market merger initiative, which is good. I suppose the other principal place it's being used is between the UK and the continent on the merchant interconnectors there. And, you know, I think probably the reason, or one of the reasons that implicit was embraced by those merchant interconnectors was because there wasn't sufficient flexibility within the CAM code So, you know, those merchant interconnectors don't have a regulated guaranteed return, guaranteed revenues they earn each year. Therefore, the regulators that regulate those pipelines were persuaded that, you know, there's too little inflexibility in the CAM network code. There's not enough flexibility in the CAM network code. Therefore, they would allow them to introduce an implicit mechanism, and that's, you know, broadly worked well. It's certainly optimized flows between the UK and the continent. It does add a significant level of complexity to the equation, but, you know, that's understood by the market participants that operate on it. So, you know, it exists and it works where it's being used. It's not necessarily something we think should be widely expanded across the TSO community. We don't really see the case for it applying to regulated TSOs, and we don't really see the case for it applying unilaterally at an interconnection point between two regulated TSOs as well, because that effectively undermines some of the bundling principles you referred to previously. But if we can bring in these new UPO auctions and introduce more flexibly and a more fit for purpose CAM network code, then those TSOs that perhaps are looking to take advantage of it or use it will have more opportunities to sell capacity to the market than they do at the moment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, there is another follow-up question.
I think it's the same question, more or
but
less.
It's very linked, yes.
Yeah.
So we'd like to jump to another one, Nico.
Yes, I think the next one I see is that in the light of adaptation to decarbonization, how do you see CAM for hydrogen if incremental capacity would disappear? I think here it's important to emphasize that we are currently discussing it, of course, within the mandate we have today. And this is unfortunately still without hydrogen being part of it. So once the new package is fully adopted, only then can we open that discussion. And if there are changes required to the network code to introduce or to include aspects of decarbonization and hydrogen, then of course this will need to be done. But at the moment, this is not part of our scoping document. It's not part of what we proposed here today. But this, of course, will need to be done once we have that legal mandate.
Thank you. I see there's a question about the timeline for the CAM network amendment process. Maybe it's something that we will discuss during the closing session of this workshop. So be a bit more patient. There are other questions about ink, but I think we broadly answer them.
If it's confirmed to keep it, and if also from stakeholders we learn that it's important to keep it, of course we will take into account that input with the notion, as we expressed here today, both from ACER side and ENTSOG side, to simplify potentially that process and to have it as efficiently as possible.
Yeah. Okay. I think we broadly answered to the question, maybe not individually to all questions, but we touched upon the subject matters of pretty much all questions, I guess. Correct me if I'm wrong. If we have a bit more time ahead, would you like maybe to come back to some of the questions we were not able to answer during the previous session? Maybe our ACER colleagues can help us with that, because they disappeared from from the Slido screen. Okay,
see.
Thank you. So there is a question back from session 1, which reads, improvement of coordination should also be a task for the NRAs, especially in situations which were experienced last year. Are there any suggestions for the improvement of coordination for NRAs by ACER? Well, Nico, would you like to provide elements on that? Or
this was also an element in our report on the congestion during the 2022 market crisis, where we did not only ask neighboring TSOs to coordinate as much as possible, but also the regulatory authorities, because some regulatory hurdles might exist and might prevent to optimize the capacity to the fullest extent. So yes, of course, also NRAs need to coordinate and collaborate. This is, I think, also at the heart of any regulator, to collaborate with the neighboring NRAs and to ensure that the market can function efficiently. How exactly to do that? That's well, Edouard, please.
No, just putting my national regulator cap again, just to make clear that when there are especially issues at borders with capacity calculation, or a TSO that wants to change the level of capacity at an IP, of course, NRAs jump in, but yeah, I guess maybe more collaboration could exist in some situations, and we are, I think, ready as regulators to be involved even more. The ultimate goal being that as much capacity as possible is made available to market participants at IPs, given the conditions in the national networks.
Steve wants to react.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to mention one other issue that we've talked about within EFET that crops up from time to time. Certainly, we experienced it last year. It's to do with the availability or the offering of interruptible capacity on a backhaul basis. So where you have a unidirectional pipe, or a pipe that has predominantly flow in one direction with perhaps very little physical reverse flow the other way. The potential availability of interruptible capacity is important in terms of sort of potentially making opportunities available. So we saw a situation last year, I think it was in Italy, if I remember rightly, where the country, or despite the situation we're in, the market was long, but there wasn't the opportunity to reverse flow back into the Austrian market from the Italian market, because there was not sufficient interruptible capacity made available. And effectively what that meant is that the TSO had to turn down capacity at the entry points into Italy from North Africa, whereas potentially there would have been an opportunity to move gas on a virtual reverse flow basis into Austria, where the market wasn't short necessarily, but it was higher priced than Italy. So I think something around a rule around the potential availability of within-day reverse flow. I know the code requires that to be made available, but in theory that can be made available up to the level of forward flow nomination at all times. And when you look at what is made available compared to what could be made available, there can be some significant differences there. So that's certainly something we will raise in our response to the consultation, and something that perhaps we should consider as part of the wider review of CAM.
Thank you, Steve. Then we had a question that it's not fully clear to me, and maybe if the one who raised the question is still online, maybe raise the hand and we would give you the floor to explain a bit what the question is about. In the meantime, I will read it. Wouldn't it be more flexible to allow group bidding on bundled products, as in entities from the same group could be bidding for the same bundle instead of installing different entities in different markets just because there is one bundled capacity of interest? To me, it's not fully clear. If any of the panelists has an idea, and otherwise I would ask the one who posed the question maybe to further clarify it.
Well, it's not clear to me either, so if clarification could be brought in would be fantastic. Otherwise, I'm afraid I can't really answer. Any other panelists have any idea about that question, or maybe we can put it aside?
Yeah, maybe it's some pan-European group have a legal entity in each member state and contract with different TSOs, and so depending who is booking, the one booking the bundle IP capacity may not be the one having the capacity contract with the TSO in the member state.
Okay,
yes, I think it
is it very
issue.
problematic?
It's more a question for Steve.
It certainly was a problem at the beginning of the network code. It's racking my brains to try and remember exactly what the issue was. I think it comes down to the actual the need to have the same sort of shipper code either side of the interconnection point. I haven't heard it raised within EFET as a substantial or regular problem, but I think clearly the fact it's being raised by the questioners suggests that there's still some issues there. I mean, I think the broad gist of the problem comes down that as we know the ability to get trading licenses in certain member states is quite challenging, and therefore, if you're effectively required to have a sort of trading license in order to be able to trade bundled product, which is actually two separate products but just bundled together in an auction, then, and you haven't got that trading license, then it becomes quite difficult. Or if you wanted to effectively trade with a counterparty that does have that license and just transfer the title at the flange, then the current rules restrict them. I'm not sure they're even network code rules. I think they're ENTSOG's interpretation or ENTSOG's initial interpretation of how the mechanics of bundling should work. But I would need to dig back in my my sort of somewhat inefficient filing system to see if I can find what the nature of the problem is.
Okay, thank you, Steve. I will address a few questions together, simply because they go a bit beyond the CAM network code revision. For instance, there is one, what about the Article 14 of the Solidarity Regulation that was about the more effective use of transmission capacity? May it be embedded in the network code revision? As long as this has to do really with capacity allocation mechanisms, those elements could be taken on board. But my understanding is that most of these elements actually have to do with the congestion management procedures guidelines. So that would become part of that revision if and when that process is started. And there was a second one like this, if I'm not mistaken, had to do. yes, the idea to reduce the issue of technical capacity is to resolve that the current mechanisms do not allow for full marketing of all really available capacity. As an example, the available capacity formula in CAM causes that surrender capacity is largely or fully blocked by the set aside quota. Again, to the extent that the surrender is part of the network code formula, we can look into that matter and see if this is an issue that prevents the efficient functioning of the market. To the extent that it's really a congestion management issue, then that would be part of this other process. Just to make clear that these two processes are distinct, and at the moment, we are only dealing with the CAM network code. If colleagues want to offer additional reflections, please go ahead.
Well, I agree with what you said. And I was just wondering whether we can take further questions from this session 1, or should we instead
maybe
go
it's
to the
good
questions of session 2?
Yeah, to take some questions from session 2 as well, because there were also a number remaining.
And for those whose questions were not answered, well, sorry, but in the interest of time, we need to go to the other questions. What is true is that if these questions remain on your side, please do not hesitate to include them in your answers to the public consultation. And even if you don't, we will keep track of these questions. And when we properly understand them, we will try to take them into account in our work to follow.
Thank you, Edouard. And then I will go with the first question I see now in Slido. And it is regarding the set aside rule. And with the end of long-term bookings, there is no longer necessary to keep 10% beyond the 5th year. Keeping 10% for quarterly, monthly, or day-ahead within-day products might be relevant, but on what ground do you think this level should be higher? Is there any study or analysis showing 10% is not enough?
But maybe Carolina will have something to say on that, because she intervened on this topic. What I can just say is that in the paper, we didn't make any proposal precisely on this. What we said is that in a system where we have more auctions via UPA, which we know is a much faster and much more efficient way of allocating capacity in one round, we may end up allocating all capacity potentially at the stage of quarterly products, because you know that the 10% set-aside rule only applies to this huge group of products, quarterly, monthly, and daily products. So what we thought is that maybe in order market participants can still have the chance to book even small volumes of capacity on short-term products, it would be necessary or would make sense to provide for new rules of set-asides. For instance, having dedicated set-aside for day-ahead products, for instance. I don't know if this fully answers the question, maybe not. On ENTSOG side, did you have any additional thoughts you wanted to share?
No, I fully agree with what you said. I just wanted to underline that what we've presented is that in the network code, it is written that it is like minimum. We haven't said that there has to be put more or less. We just said what is currently in the network code, and it is up to, like, on a member state basis to decide how much is put aside. And to add, I am not aware of any study or analysis that would say that there is more of shorter term capacity needed. However, as Edward said, that's why the discussions were held, because like basically if we allow for more options and the set-aside rule applies only to quarterly products, it may turn out that there is a small amount of products left for shorter term. Therefore, the discussion was about like maybe it would be beneficial to sort of like provide individual for the set-aside rule for individual products. We were like, it's not like that we were saying it has to be increased or whatever. It was more to focus on to guarantee that on like the shorter term products there will be some capacity, but it was just like initial discussion, and even in the issue solution supporting we said it should be further discussed, analyzed, etc. So that's just it from my side. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, just perhaps I'll just chip in as well. I mean, I think it's fair to say the set-aside rules haven't been flagged as a huge problem amongst EFET members, and we do recognise that the figures in there are minimum, so it is already possible for NROs, TSOs to increase that. I mean, the set-aside rules can certainly at big interconnection points reduce or mean a fairly significant amount of capacity is not made available under the annual auctions. So it's not always the case that there's not enough capacity trickling down, and it potentially can stop the bundling of annual capacity as well under certain circumstances. So I think I'm not sure the rules necessarily need to change. Maybe they need to be applied more sort of cleverly. And I think you talked about trying to create separate set-aside rules for separate products. Well, in theory, that's a good idea, but the demand for capacity, whether that's long-term or short-term, does change. And we have seen to start off with a significant move away from long-term towards short-term, and we're now seeing perhaps a reversion back towards sort of booking capacity on a more longer-term basis, whether it be sort of quarterly or annual. So if we came up with individual set-asides for daily, for monthly, for quarterly, we'd probably get them wrong. So I'm not sure we need to change very much in this area.
Thanks, Steve. And then I will go to the next question, and it's again about ascending clock algorithm. And I mean, it came up a lot. We shared some of the issues that there can be with the difficulty to define the correct price steps. There may be potential market manipulation. So how to patch them up, or why not just switch to the UPA in case of all auctions? I believe this was an element of discussion also in our joint work as ACER and ENTSOG. So Edouard or Claude, if you want to, or Carolina.
Well, maybe the one who answered, who posed this question, participated also to the previous consultation that we conducted. One of the questions of one of the consultation was whether you believe that ACA should be retained, or that should it be amended or suppressed. Actually, vast majority of respondents said that they very much value ACA for long-term products, so for yearly, quarterly, and monthly. That is very useful for them in terms of price revealing, also to adjust their bid. So we are conscious of the issues posed by ACA, but at the same time, we see that the market really likes this method of allocation. And so, as at ACER, we are very careful with what the market says. We, rather than proposing to change it to UPA or to an alternative algorithm, we rather propose to keep it, but amend it in a way it works better. But of course, it's something that since the beginning was only dedicated to products where we have, in normal time, sufficient time to allocate capacity. UPA is used since the beginning for day-ahead products, where you have only 1 day to allocate capacity. So, does anyone want to complement on that?
I can jump in. Yeah, you're right. I mean, within EFET members, we've got used to the ACA process for long-term capacity, and we see benefits through price discovery. So we're not looking to change the allocation mechanism. We're just looking to maybe introduce something that will ensure that it closes and that the opportunity for that capacity is to be made available. If it can't be made available through the or if it doesn't sell through the ACA, is still there. And I think that there was a mention of something about market manipulation in the question. I'm not sure I recognise any instances of market manipulation around ACA auctions. I mean, there have been auctions where after many rounds of bidding, the bids pull out at the last minute, just before the auction closes. I mean, that's, well, I'm not sure that's ever been put forward as a case of manipulation. I think it was clearly a case of just the spreads changed at that particular point in time. So, if all of a sudden the capacity you're prepared to pay a lot of money for isn't as worth as much as it was in the previous round or the previous day, then you'll reflect that in your bid, and that may mean the auction closes without anything selling. The beauty of the new system would be that you would then immediately have a UPA auction, which would allow that capacity to be sold at how the market then values it. So.
Thank you, Steve. As I will close this session, I would give last opportunity to Claude or Carolina to reflect on this question.
Yeah, thank you. So just to say, yeah, it's what the market wants. I think they like ascending clock auction for price discovery. Then we do not have the time to do only ascending clock auction. That's why we came up with UPA after that. But we should keep, I think, because it's what the market wants, the ascending clock auction at the start.
Thank you all, and I will just add that as ACER, we of course also have the remit rules to tackle any market manipulation. That's of course a separate issue. Today we're talking about the efficient allocation of capacity, and the two processes or two sets of legislation complement each other. So thank you for everyone listening here and asking the questions, and to the panelists to help us with addressing not only the questions on the other topics, but also the questions on the maximizing capacity and improving the offering of capacity. That will bring us to the closing remarks, where I will first go into the next steps. It was also a question I saw pop up a couple of times. And of course, this workshop is one way of ACER interacting with all of you. It's not the only way. There is a corresponding public consultation ongoing, to which of course I invite all of you to contribute and to reply. The purpose of this public consultation is more on scoping the issue. So we really want to understand what are the issues, what are the articles where we would like to see some changes, what do we really want to keep as it is. That's the first priority. If you want to comment on some of the technical elements that you heard today, you're welcome to do so, but keep in mind that we also will consult later on the technical elements, which we foresee to do at some point in the first quarter of next year. So we will take back the feedback that we receive here on what are the key issues for you. We will complement our technical thinking where it is less mature. Some other elements, for instance, the ACER-ENTSOG issue solutions note already contains a lot of detail, needs to be further refined, but on some other elements, there are more high level thinking. This we will complement with more detail, and we will consult on that again. Expect this to happen at some point in the first quarter. At the same time, we will of course also try to confirm the scoping with the European Commission, as they are also involved later in the process to do the effective legislation. So we will reach out to them to inform them about the scoping inputs that we received from you. And that will lead us, and this is most likely work for the second and third quarter, is to draft a reasoned recommendation by ACER with a clear proposal to amend the CAM network code that we will then submit to the European Commission for them to bring it to the legislative process of comitology. So this is what we have in mind as the timeline. We will, of course, communicate on all these steps at the appropriate time, and we will consult again with you. We may do additional workshops if these are appreciated. We try to run a very inclusive process. Then I would ask Edouard if you have anything to add or any observations on this workshop.
Well, no particular closing remarks. I just would like to thank you, all of those that participated, and maybe a request from our side to those who intend to participate to the public consultation. Please provide answers, but provide substantiated answers. The yes/no answers sometimes are not so useful for us. What we are expecting is for you to provide explanation in order we can properly understand your point of view. This is very important for us, and the more substantiated your answers, the more appropriate the proposal we may make to the European Commission. That's it.
And I would hand the floor to Ricardo to close the workshop.
Thanks, Nico. Thanks, Edouard. Just very briefly on my side, little to add. The discussions today were very lively and participated. We had more than 170 participants. We got more than 45 questions. It shows interest, which we are very happy to see. And just to echo what you said about the public consultation, there is still time until the 5th of January. So please send your responses to us, considering that we are in the scoping phase. We really need to and want to be as inclusive as possible with you stakeholders. And then just before closing, I would like to thank all of you participants and the colleagues who were on screen today. Of course, Nico, Edouard, Steve, then Carolina, Claude, but also those who were behind the scenes in the ACER team in Ljubljana, especially Nora, Živile, Kjasha, and Alia. Many more colleagues will be involved into this work on the NRA side as well when the drafting exercise will start, and the exercise will be inclusive to everyone. Having said that, let me thank again and wish you a good continuation of the day, and see you at the next occasion. Bye.
Bye-bye. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Cheers.